Hey, David. Doing all right?
What'd you say, Phil? Hey, Gav.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Doug?
Peace.
Yes.
I'm the only one old enough to remember that as a high sign.
I don't know. I remember that well, although I was a small boy.
You were a youngster.
Yeah. I was probably 10 or 11.
Well,
You probably
it
had
wasn't
long
all,
hair, man.
it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Oh, man.
Wow, how are you? Peace. Okay,
Peace.
gotcha.
I'm good. How are y'all?
Hey, wow.
Great.
I thought I invented that. No? Okay. I'm going to ask everyone other than board members if they would keep themselves muted until called upon, please. So Jeanette Whitson, I do not believe will be joining us today. It's possible she might join us for the very first business item. I'm not sure. I'll put in a call to her. Haven't heard back, but if she does join us, it'll be just for that item. Then she'll probably have to excuse herself. Mr. Chairman, it's your call. We've got 1 or 2 minutes after.
Do we know where Ron Ferris is?
He's here. He's on.
Okay.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Historical Zoning Commission for Belmead. We'll do a brief roll call for the record. Ron Ferris,
Present.
Bunny Blackburn,
Here.
Gavin Duke,
Here, Gavin.
and I'm Mal Wall. We're also joined today with City Manager Beth Bearden, City Attorney Doug Berry, Assistant City Manager and Building Official Lyle Patterson, and the City Recorder Edie Glasser. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of the last meeting? Any comments,
Yes.
changes?
I have no comments.
For me.
Do we have a motion to approve as submitted?
I'll make a motion that we approve as submitted, Gavin.
I second it. Bunny.
All in favor? Ron,
Aye.
Gavin,
Aye.
Bunny,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay. Short speech on procedures. Lyle will introduce each applicant. Each applicant or their sponsor representative can present their case for what it is they want and why they deserve it. If you speak for or against a proposal, please identify yourself for the record. After the case is presented, the board will discuss it and ask questions. Comments will be solicited, and eventually we'll close the public portion. The board will discuss among themselves the issues involved and then make a determination to approve, disapprove, or defer. So with that being said, Lyle.
Okay, I'm gonna remind everybody one more time, if you would, keep yourself muted other than the board until called upon. Also, we're trying a new automatically transcribed minutes called Otter. And I'm going to ask everyone if they would to speak clearly and loud, and especially don't speak over someone else. It tends to get garbled. So having said that, keep that in mind. The first item under old business is the application for certificate of appropriateness for Paul Gravett, 1220 Chickering Road, for the demolition of existing home, property of significance, and construct a new single-family home. They were here in September and got a 60-day deferral. And whoever is representing you are up, and I will share my screen.
Good afternoon. This is Rocky King, and along with my colleagues, Danica Grosco and Russell Harwell, we represent the Gravetts and Residential Tech LLC, the property owner of 1220 Chickering Road. I just want to take a second and thank the commission for deferring on this back in August to allow us, or September, excuse me, to allow us additional time to supplement the record. And as you can see by our filings that we submitted for this cycle, we have in fact supplemented the record with a letter from our law firm outlining why we believe we're entitled to remove the structure that is currently at 1220 Chickering Road, along with the supporting documentation in support of that application, which includes a letter from Roger Higgins, a letter from our architect, and a letter from a structural engineer. So I wanted to start off with, we have gone through the guidelines in the Historic Zoning Commission and applied those guidelines to the structure that is currently situated at 1220 Chickering Road. When you look at those guidelines, a property of significance has 5 elements included in its criteria that all must be satisfied to be actually considered a property of significance. And when you look at
just a second, it doesn't say anywhere that they all have to be satisfied.
Well, Ms. Blackburn, when you actually look at the property of significance, it starts with 5 caret marks on page 4.
Yes,
And-
but it does not require that they all be satisfied anywhere. It just says these are the things to consider.
It actually uses the word "and" in the conjunctive. So we have viewed that as, because from a legal standpoint, it is a conjunctive at that point. It does not say or, it says and. But regardless, as our brief sets out, we don't believe any of those criteria are in fact satisfied. And when you start at the very first criteria element, which is the age of the structure, I think it's important to note that when you drive past 1220 Chickering Road and look up on that hill, what was there in 1939 is respectfully not there today. It's been documented by Mr. Terode, our architect, that this structure was originally around 35 to 4,000 square feet. We had our structural engineer come through and look at the footprint of this home, and he also concurred that this structure was around 35 to 4,000 square feet in its original design. And what you see that has occurred in our submission is that in the 1960s and then again in 2007, there were numerous renovations and additions to this structure. And what that caused is it caused a structure to go from 35,000 to 4,000 square feet to almost 12,000 square feet. And what that means is that the footprint of this home has almost quadrupled since it was initially constructed. And so what was there in 39 is frankly not there today. When you look at the average age of the home based on the date of the renovation, the date of the original construction, and the square footage added, we went out and amortized that and just did the math, and it comes up to an average square footage age of around 1977 as compared to 1939. And in speaking with the architect on this project in his prior presentation to this commission, one of the issues that I asked was, well, can that 1939 home be extracted from its numerous renovations? And both our structural engineer, Mr. Higgins, and our architect all came to the conclusion that it can't be, because the original construction of this home no longer exists in any identifiable or discernible manner. The kitchen has been completely pulled out of the original structure. What was the hallmark of the family room, that is all gone now. What's there is a blown out family room where the original millwork has been completely stripped away and redone from our estimate back in 2007. So the historical elements that one would hope to see in a 1939 home simply no longer exist. It gets worse upstairs, where the layout of the home is no longer in any configuration that would have been found in 1939. I'm sorry, if anyone has a question, just interrupt me at any point along the way, and I'm happy to entertain them. But as Mr. Terode found, the actual front facade of the home, because of these renovations, has also been altered. So the way you would have perceived this home back in 1939 has been changed as well. So when you're looking at the first element, which is the element that is the most clear line, it's either a home built before 39 or after 39, what we would submit is that what you're looking at today has no semblance to its original design of 1939, nor does the average age of the square footage of this structure relate back to 1939. In fact, it has more than likely an average age of 1977. So when you are considering that factor alone, we don't believe the first criteria has been satisfied. And when you look at the next area in the actual guidelines that is discussed, it references the registry, the National Historic Registry, and draws upon several elements of the historic registry, and in fact references the Code of Federal Regulations, which enumerates the categories that should be considered when placing a home on the National Registry. Boiled down to its simplest form, the question is, can this home be on the National Registry, or is it already on the National Registry? And we had Mr. Higgins, who has a degree in historic preservation, come through and look at this home, along with the actual factors that are considered by the registry. And the answer to all of those questions are no. This home is, again, a home that has been substantially modified from its original construction. What you would hope and what the registry looks for, original design elements such as original lighting, original molding, original casings, original millwork, all of that has been pulled out. And what you're seeing instead is millwork and molding and design elements that occurred from the 1960s and in the 2007 renovation and additions. And it's important to note that these renovation and additions amplified what was otherwise a very modest 1939 home. The 60s renovation added wings to the house on both its left and right flank. And then the 2007 addition added more square footage on top of those wings and created a huge second floor addition. As Mr. Higgins and Mr. Terode commented in their own papers to this commission, the primary design of these renovations was more focused on square footage as compared to being architecturally and historically sensitive to the original construction designs of the home. And in fact, if you look at Mr. Terode's paper, this home is almost architecturally confused. It has elements of Greek revival, it has elements of American colonialism, and Mr. Higgins told me it even had Georgian styles as well. And while I'm not an architect, I'm just a lawyer, what I can say is when you have a home that is drawing upon 3 different types of architectural design elements, one thing is consistent, that each renovation that was done was not done as an homage to the prior architectural history. It was done to amplify the home. And quite frankly, if this commission would have existed in the 60s and 2007s, I think we would be having a debate whether these renovations would have even occurred. The only thing that has been historically consistent about this home is that each owner, since the original owner, has sought to amplify and change it. In the 1960s, there was 3,000 square feet added to this home. And then when a new owner took over in the 2000s, there was 5,000 square feet added to this home. So this home does not have the original historic characters that one would have expected from a 1939 construction, because frankly, it's no longer a 1939 construction. So when you look at those elements of the historic registry, the answer to all of them are no. So we pivot then to the next question the historic registry asked. Was there a master architect or master builder associated with this property? And we've gone through and we've tried to trace back who constructed this home. And the answer has only been found silence. We can't find an architect of record of any prominence, nor a builder of record of any prominence. So what we're looking at here is just a house that was constructed by good tradesmen at their time, but that have not risen to levels of historic significance. So that criteria of the registry is not satisfied. So then we begin to pivot to the next question the registry would ask. Did something historical happen at this home, or did a historical person live at this home? And the answer to both of those questions are no. Using the criteria that the registry uses to define a historic event and to use the criteria to define a historic person, those criteria are not satisfied by any of the owners that have occupied this home. And from our review of the events that have occurred at this home, we have not found a historically grounded fact that would promote this home to be eligible to be found on the National Registry. So when we go through the registry and we look at the architectural history, the elements, the people that have lived at the home, the people that may have designed the home, we have not found evidence that this home would be eligible to be listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And we asked Mr. Higgins that exact question, and as an individual that has worked on historic homes and has worked with the registry, he also answered that it would not be eligible to be placed on the historic registry. So the final elements that we're looking at are a set of factors, as you're seeing in front of you, of whether this home has information imported to its prehistory or history or other characteristics that this board finds to be important. And in looking at, again, the guidelines on page 4 and 5, you see in that fifth caret several facts that again mirror those factors that the registry would consider, such as does it have broad cultural, political, economic, or social association with the historic development of Belmead, the state, or the nation. Now, while this home is one of the more older homes in Belmead, and we acknowledge that, that older home is frankly no longer in the configuration that it was done in 1939. And in fact, we asked our engineer this question, because if you kind of fast forward and go to page 17 of the guidelines, it makes reference to, can that original structure be relocated? And I think the question is, the answer to that question was no, which is telling, because that structure can no longer be found in that 1939 structure can no longer be found in the structure that is there today in 2020. So the historic value of this home, while it is an older home in Belmead, we respectfully say that it doesn't satisfy the criteria to be a property of significance worth preserving in its current format. Moreover, although this is not the commission that would ultimately approve the new home construction, we added the renderings of what the architect would propose and work with the city of Belmead, only to show that the hope and design for the new home for this structure would pay homage to the actual homes in Belmead and be consistent with the construction of those homes in an architectural style, and be time appropriate and historically appropriate, even though it was a modern home constructed this century. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that the commissioners would have on this issues.
Do you have a photo of the existing home again so we can refamiliarize?
Yes, it should be in Mr. Terrode's original application, Lyle. So this is the original home. You see the wing addition, and then you can start seeing in the background the additions upon additions being cobbled together. The original portion of the home would have been the center portion of the home where the columns are, but that has even been changed again to more of a horizontal effect as compared to a vertical effect because of the addition of width to the structure.
I've been provided multiple thumbnails, so if anybody wants to call one out, I'll be happy to pull it up.
Lyle, is there?
You have one at the back as well, Lyle?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the back of the home, and you can almost tell by the roof line and the way it pitches and drops down where the original structure is and where the 60s additions went, and then how the 2007 additions again spliced on to the 1960s additions. Being in this house, it's frankly maze-like to a certain extent because there is no central corridor of the home, and Mr. Terrode discusses this fact in his submission. This is very much a wing-oriented house, and if that 2007 edition, as you look on the screen on the left-hand side, came out further, would have very much the resemblance of a U as compared to an original Georgian or colonial house, which would have been primarily centered in, have almost a heart in the middle of the house where the living spaces would kind of expand outwards. So that's why, again, when we're talking about what is there today as compared to what was there in 1939, there is no comparison anymore. And again, the renderings, and I'm happy to show them in our submission that Mr. Terrode provided in his filings. We're proposing a large Dutch colonial home that would be consistent with the other colonial and Dutch colonial homes found within Belmead. We're very respectful of the tradition of Belmead. We're very respectful of what has been built in Belmead, and a design has been put together, again, to be consistent with that construction. We're not trying to construct a home that would be found on Malibu or anything along those lines, where it would be, a streamlined facade and clean lines. We're trying to be absolutely consistent, and we would continue to work with the city of Belmead, our architects, on ensuring that that goal was achieved. Could I answer anyone else's questions?
Is the home that's being presented, you mentioned earlier that it was going to require some other board reviews. Is the home that's being submitted, is that being submitted for approval as well? Or is this just an application for removal of this home?
It's an application for removal of this home. If I understand the process correctly, we have to get this application granted, and then move into the process of getting approval of the designs. To use the saying, we don't want to get too far out in front of our skis and presume that this commission has granted us the application to demolish. We're being respectful of this application process. But we do have renderings, and Lyle would be able to bring up those renderings from the home screen to show them. And again, those are renderings, elevations that have been presented and put together by our architect. And again, we're cognizant of the fact that we would continue to work with the city of Belmead to ensure that that design would be approved by the city as well.
So these renderings we are not considering for approval is what I need to understand.
I think that's correct. You're not looking at to approve the renderings, but what we wanted to submit the renderings for was to give you assurances as best as we can in our own timeline and process that what is being contemplated here would be respectful of the architecture that has been historically preserved within Belmead, if that makes better sense.
Wow, how do we view that as far as, I know the one on Ellendale is still sort of getting ready to go up possibly, but if this comes down, then is that just a blank lot to be sold? And then we still have opportunity to view whatever house goes up, but we can't really tie anything to that architecture.
No, you're correct. I mean, if we're just, I personally was not aware that we were just looking at this to demo, but if that's what they're wanting to do, then if the house is or the lot is sold, it will come back before this commission for approval, whatever design it is.
I would say, gentlemen, the goal is, and that's why we've included these renderings, is to build a new single family home. I know that design has to be approved by the city. Right. Our current clients live in Westview. They've outgrown their existing home, and this plot was always purchased with the intent to move into a much larger space in the Belmead area.
When was this house purchased by them?
About 5 years ago, ma'am.
Well, in full disclosure, I've worked on some of the site work of it, and I've been around the house, and the main body of it is really cut up. And as you can see in this back portion there's not a lot of character or architectural elements in this. So just in full disclosure, I have worked on the site, but was not responsible for any of the tree work or just basically siting a new house.
Is there anyone anyone else in the on the conference call who would like to speak for or against this proposal?
I would. This is Ann Russell.
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. First, I'll introduce myself. I am the next door neighbor. I'm the closest neighbor to 1220. I live in 1218, and our driveways are facing each other. So our driveways are actually the closest. Joe and I also have about the same size lot, about 9 acres. And we lived in 1218 for about 25 years, since about 1995. So I have three brief points. One that we bought because we were attracted to the land and the setting, this beautiful, gorgeous setting that flows from our yard, which connects to John Ingram, and then this yard all the way down. We think it's some of the prettiest property in Belmead. And we also plan to stay there forever. But Joe and I first became knowledgeable about this particular house at 1220 as a prospective buyer before we bought our house. We looked at it and found it to be in very, very poor condition and had not been updated. So this would have been in the early 90s, somewhere 92, 93, somewhere. Original kitchen, galley kitchen, linoleum floor, all that sort of thing. There was really nothing attracting us into the house past the front door. I mean, it has an elegant front, but nothing past the front door. So we decided not to buy that. And then fortunately, the house next door, which was the Warner house, came on the market shortly thereafter. And our house was not in good condition either, having also built in 1939. And you can probably, everybody on this call has seen our house and what we've done with it. We also were a prospective buyer with our daughter and son-in-law. That's Rebecca Russell Howard and John Howard, who live at 1205. They're currently doing some extensive work in their house now. For some strange reason, they thought it was a good idea to live next door to her parents. So we were thrilled. We'd have 3 grandchildren next door. But when we all looked at it, unfortunately, what we found was it was just a patchwork of rooms sort of thrown together in a disconnected, a disjointed way. It was rambling, it was confusing, it was muddled, it was just a maze of rooms kind of illogically stuck on from one space to the next. And we consequently, the 4 of us looking at the house, concluded that there was no value in the house, that the value really was in the land, in the beautiful land. And looking at the house itself, John and Rebecca, who John is in the construction business and a developer and works a lot with contractors. So he picks up on a lot of things that we don't. We all unanimously agreed that the house was uninhabitable. So there was no way to really even live in it and try to fix it up. It was just uninhabitable. Whether it was inside the backyard was so bad, there was just no appeal. And when you walked around the house, and really, honestly, in the backyard, you were sinking up to your ankles in water. And the front yard, there were so many dead trees that it was hard to even see the road. And that was confirmed by an almost 100-page inspection report. So they did get so far to see what else, is it possible to do anything to this house? And I'm sure John probably still has that, but it really, everything in the world needed to be done to make it even habitable. So my second point is that this property has already been improved by Paul Gravett. He has cleaned up the property, his 9 acres, the debris, the dead or diseased trees, the invasive growth and the privet, and he has taken out things that needed to have been taken out for decades and decades. And honestly, we had a lot of that in our yard too, and it has taken us quite a while to clean out, and particularly the stuff that was in the middle, where I found bottles and cans and just trash and just tree stumps. And so Paul has done a great job getting some very fine landscapers there who have cleaned out the diseased trees and made that property better and healthy. He's brought in just loads and loads of organic soil and planted a lot of new trees and implemented a very high-end landscaping plan that I think is beautiful and exciting, and it's going to be even better as he starts to implement this a building plan for his house and tearing down this house, hopefully, which does need to be torn down. So I think his work so far has been one of a labor of love, that he has truly added value to this property. At least we as the next door neighbors, the one who see it every day, and that we're the closest neighbor in terms of the proximity of our actual bricks and mortar. He has added value and beauty not only to his property, but to ours, as we have sort of done some things jointly to make the two properties seamless in their flow, and to clean up and clean out some of the diseased and dead trees and limbs. So I think Joe joins with me in believing that the added value to this piece of property is going in the right direction, and that the house itself is negative and has no value whatsoever in the estate, and what Paul believes that he can do with the property and has already shown that he's doing with the property really adds to the estate value of Chickering Road and the estate value of 1218, my house, and 1220, his house. And it really is, it's becoming a property that it hasn't been in quite a long time. And so we're very pleased with the result. So the third and last point that I would make is that Joe and I have reviewed the renderings and architectural design that's proposed, and I understand we're not approving that or looking at that today, but I think a lovely estate home is exactly what needs to be there. That it be complementary to the grandeur of this 9 acres on the lot and our 9 acres. And we have gotten to know Mr. Gravett personally. He has very nicely come and asked us and kept us informed on everything before he starts to do anything. So he's been so good to work with, and I think he has great intentions to turn this into a beautiful grand estate that is appropriate to Chickering Road and to all of Belmead. So those are my comments. And if there are any questions, I'm glad to see if I can answer anything.
Thank you, Mrs. Russell. That was great input. Is there anyone else on the call who would like to speak for or against this proposal?
Yes, I would like to speak if that's okay.
Sure.
My name is Chris Barkley, and I'm a landscape architect with HDLA Landscape Architects. And I am accompanied today by Kim Hinton, who is a local architect, one of the founding partners of Tuck Hinton Architects, and is now owns his own firm here in Nashville. And today we are representing George and Pat Bullard, who are neighbors to 1220, who currently reside at 1224 Chickering Road. And we have put together a little presentation that we'd like to share with the group today. And I believe Lyle has access to that and can pull it up. But the presentation that we have put together, we hope will lay out the facts of 1220 Chickering Road and the significance of the architects who designed and renovated this property over the years, and how this property actually adds to the fabric that makes Belmead such a unique and special place. If you could please go to the next slide, Lyle. On this slide, we just have a couple snippets from the application, the property of significance application that was submitted. And as it was previously noted, the property was built in 1939. And what we hope to show you in this presentation is that there are still elements and character of the home from the original 1939 construction. I did want to point out in the middle of this slide where we have it highlighted, the property of significance, that it was noted that there is no notable work of a master builder, designer, or architect. And I know the previous presenter actually said that there was no evidence of a significant architect who had worked on this property. However, we truly believe that is not the case. In fact, we will show you evidence today of the original architect of the home, Welby Pugin, as well as the 1962 edition that was done by Edwin Keeble. Go to the next slide, please. This is the snippets of the attorney's letter that was submitted, and I just wanted to highlight a few portions of this document. First, on the bottom left, one of the quotes was, "What little remains of the original structure among the hodgepodge of additions and renovations is a dilapidated framework with no historical significance to support an argument in favor of saving." We respectfully disagree with this statement, and again, hope to prove to you today that there is significance both in the designers who worked on this property, as well as how this adds to the character of Belle Meade. In the middle paragraph, I did want to highlight that it notes the essence of the current structure does not contribute to the distinguished nature of the community in its architectural style. Instead, the mere existence of the remnants of the original structure yields an inconsequential, if not detrimental, contribution to the prestige of Belle Meade's historic homes. Again, we respectfully disagree with this statement. We truly feel that this home is an integral part of what makes both the fabric of Belle Meade and the sense of place, and just Belle Meade, the unique and special place that it is today. And as was noted earlier, this is one of the last oldest homes remaining on Chickering. One of the other things that I would like to point out in the right-hand side, the last column, it notes the owners have found no records that indicate that this home was constructed by a master builder, designer, or architect. Again, we hope to show you today that there is significance to the architects and designers who have worked on this property over time. If you could go to the next slide, please. In the letter of support of demolition from the structural engineer, I would just like to point out that, one of the last lines says the original structure no longer bears any semblance to its original construction. That may be true on the interior. However, we feel that the exterior of the home and the presence from Chickering still has a lot of the 1939 character that it once originally had. And then I know it also points out if they were asked to relocate the 1939's original home for preservation, they could not likely fulfill this request. I know it was stated earlier that that was part of the historic register requirements, but I don't know that anyone has requested that the structure be relocated, merely more preserved in place. If you could go to the next slide, please. I would like to just go through a quick history of 1220 Chickering Road. So the home has only had 2 previous owners prior to the current owner. In 1939, the home was built for Mr. and Miss Stevens by Welby Pugin. In 1962, the Stevens commissioned Edwin Keeble to do an addition to the home. In 1993, it was sold to Mr. and Mrs. Briggs, in which time they did an addition in 2007. It was then sold in 2016 to Residential Tech, and then listed for sale again in 2019. What you see on the right hand of this slide are 2 images from Ridley Will's book, which gives a brief overview into the Stevens and this home. It was Ridley's book, Chickering Road and Its People. And we believe that this is a well-respected catalog of homes and its people along Chickering Road, thus speaking to the significance of 1220 Chickering Road. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is an excerpt from the Interesting Homes of Middle Tennessee book, which we think clearly the authors of this book felt that this home was significant enough to catalog in this book that outlines some of the most interesting homes in Middle Tennessee. And you can see the caption from that book and the image where it catalogs this home in that book. If you could go to the next slide, please. We would like to discuss the original architect that built the designed and built the 1939's original structure. It was designed by Welby Pugin, or also known as Byron Welby Northmore Pugin. He was a distinguished architect, born in Durham, North Carolina, but also has many distinguished works in Nashville and the region. I won't go into his extensive work history, which you can see we've outlined here on the left, but he did begin his practice with Pugin and Wallace in 1926, and they designed this home in 1939. And what you see on the image to the right is a rough outline. Again, this is over an aerial image, so it is slightly off, but approximately denotes the original structure of the home, and we do have those plans. So if you go to the next slide, these are blueprints of the original plans from 1939. This shows the first floor plan of the structure. And I apologize, it's a little hard to read. These were the best scans that we had access to. But this shows the first floor plan. If you could go to the next slide. So this shows the original elevation in 1939. And as you can see from this slide, there are many significant elements that are still visible from Chickering Road, especially after many of the trees have been cleared. There is a great view to the home that you can still see many of these elements in the original structure from 1939, most notably the columns, some of the lower windows, but it still has that stately architecture from Chickering. If you go to the next slide, these are some of the side elevations of the home. And then if you go to the next slide, please, we did want to outline some of the notable works by Welby Pugin, one of which is the Saunders Payne home in Aberdeen, Mississippi, which is on the National Historic Register. It was there in 2017. I did want to point out that the portion of this home that Mr. Pugin worked on was in fact an addition, not too dissimilar from some of the notable additions like the 62 addition that was done on this home, which Edwin Keeble worked on. But Mr. Pugin is recognized and highly publicized in all of the historic materials distributed by the Saunders Payne home. And in fact, the National Registry goes on to say, the owners and architect B. Welby and Pugin seem to have considered this renovation a preservation project as attested to in the meticulous details in 18 pages of typewritten architect specifications and notes. And it also goes further to say that B. Welby and Pugin's more notable early residences included E.B. Stevens Jr., which is the 1220 Chickering Road property. So please note that it was in the Historic Register noted as a very notable residence, as well as
Are you kidding me?
Newman Cheek residence. And then a renovation was done on this home from 1939 to 1940, which was roughly the same time period of the 1220 property. If you could go to the next slide, please. This highlights the Newman Cheek home, or also called Sherwood Forest. And you can see in Nashville's home book on architecture, it's noted that this property, which was done by Mr. Pugin, was a fine specimen of Nashville residential architecture, which was pictured in the Southern Architecture Illustrated book. Is the only Nashville home pictured in this collection of 100 of the most outstanding creations of leading Southern architects, and goes further to say Welby M. Pugin, Nashville architect, designer of the house, is of the 8th successive generation of English architects, his father Byron Pugin having been a native of England, where he was trained and did much of his work before coming to Atlanta to practice, and then obviously built several homes in Nashville. On the next slide, another notable work by Mr. Pugin was Ingleham, which is listed on the Tennessee Historical Commission and Williamson County's Historic Property Survey. Built in 1858, Mr. Pugin worked on a restoration of this project or this home, and it after that burned, and in which time Mr. Pugin designed the home within the existing outside walls of the Sharps home, which they moved into in early 1940. The next slide goes into the additions done by Edwin Keeble, which needs no introduction to the Belmead community, has many notable works in and around Belmead. I won't go into his distinguished career, which again, many of you know, but he did complete the addition in 1962, which is roughly outlined with the red dashed lines on this plan. And then if you go into the next slide, these are the plans from the 1962 edition of the home. And again, my apologies, these are hard to read, but these were the best scans that we had. The next slide shows elevations of the additions from 1962, many of which are still visible today. Most notable, one of the keys identifying a Keeble is the octagonal window, which was kind of a signature in his architecture. If you go to the next slide, I did want to point out some of the notable non-residential works that Edwin Keeble was responsible for in and around the area. I won't go into all these, but Vanderbilt University, a lot of the churches in and around town, and probably the most landmark building of his career is the L&C Tower, which many of you are familiar with. But if you go to the next slide, this outlines some of the residential projects in and around Belmead that Edwin Keeble is most noted for. This is by no means an exhaustive list because the list is quite extensive, but I did want to highlight a few. 1431 Shelton Avenue, the Dr. Cleo Miller House, which is on the National Historic Register, as well as 5335 Stanford Drive, Dr. Cobb Pilcher House, which is also listed on the Historic Register. And I did want to point out that it was noted in the Nashville Post. They had an article about, it was titled "It's a Keeble," which is a very kind of prestigious piece of architecture to own in the community, and the value that Keeble brings to the homes in and around the community. I did want to point out in the next slide, these are a few existing images of the home, which were taken from the listing from Frederick and Clark. All of these are accessible online, but you can see the glowing description of the property when this house was listed. And then I know there was a request in the last meeting for some interior shots of the home as well. Also, the next slide, if you go there, please, are some images from the Frederick and Clark online listing of the interior of the home. I understand that it was mentioned that it was uninhabitable, but you can see quite stunning home. In the next slide, I would like to turn over to Kim Hinton for a brief statement.
I'll take it from there. Thank you. Also, I'm not an attorney, and I appreciate the thoroughness of the efforts. And I also know the Pfefferts Road firm, and they've done a lot of very excellent work in our city. So I know them well. But we respectfully disagree with many things that were listed as reasons for demolition. A lot of things are subjective. But we've shown you, we believe, very important information which may or may not have been known by the consultants and the architect and others. We respectfully disagree in many things. It was erected in 1939. It is a notable work. Welby Pugin was an accomplished architect. Edwin Keeble, of course, was also an accomplished architect, probably perhaps the greatest one in this area during the 20th century, other than maybe Russell Hart. The 2007 edition, we understand it's underwhelming, but it's only partially visible from Chickering Road. The original Pugin front and the Keeble edition are visible from Chickering Road, and especially we'll see that as the leaves start to drop. And the most curious thing is that there was a lot said about the house being in terrible condition. and, you know, it's all about to fall down or whatever it can be done. But when it was offered for sale 1 year ago, the comments were glowing and the photographs are pretty impressive. We respectfully disagree with the architect Rhodes' statement that whatever sense of the original structure or site possessed was lost many years ago. The attorney's 7-page diatribe we consider kind of cruel disrespect for the house, its previous owners, its architects, and its history. And we respectfully disagree with the interior designer's evaluation. It doesn't mention the capable architects of the past. We strongly disagree with the structural engineers that it would be nearly impossible to salvage the 1939 original home. I think this is simply not true. I have worked on additions and projects like this in the past. I actually worked on the Keeble house that was listed called Deepwood on Stanford Drive for the Sigran family, where we did a substantial addition to the back of the house while we maintained the integrity of the original. And we are confident that a capable architect, if requested, could maintain the historic presence of the house and address the owner's domestic needs. It's a challenge. It would be a challenge for any architect. Most importantly, I think, is this quote from Ridley Wills, that he prefers that the house not be torn down. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Kim. If you go to the next slide, I would just like to read this statement. In closing, has been shown in this presentation, 1220 Chickering Road is not only one of Belmead's oldest homes and the second oldest on Chickering Road, but it was also designed by Welby Pugin, a celebrated architect of significant architectural lineage who has other homes on the National Register of Historic Places. There has been no mention by the current owner that 1220 Chickering Road is in any way structurally unsound. The original owner, L.B. Stevens, was a well-known engineer who graduated, or sorry, that should say Edwin Keeble, known engineer who graduated from Vanderbilt with the highest award offered by the engineering school. Mr. Stevens served as a contractor on the build of this home in 1939, so it is no surprise it's in very good structural condition. As well, it should be considered the 1962 edition is historically significant simply because of the prestigious reputation of Edwin Keeble. The photos presented show the condition of the interiors at the time the current owner purchased it in 2016, and again, the same photos were used when the current owner put the home on the market in 2019. The lovely large lot with a generous building envelope should leave room for the preservation of the historic home, as well as allow enough room for any additions desired. Our plea is that the Historic Zoning Commission members honor the historic significance of 1220 Chickering Road by ruling the original Welby Pugin home, as well as the 1962 Keeble addition, remain. And we appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Ken and Chris, thank you very much. You've gone to a great deal of trouble to present a pretty compelling case.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to speak to this issue?
I have a question. I just am a bit astounded that we were told by the first presenter that there were not significant architects involved in this. Why were we told that?
Well,
Sorry, I don't know a more significant architect. I mean, Edwin Keeble, I mean, the idea that why were we told that?
because I've never seen the drawings, nor do I possess the drawings, nor do our architects possess the drawings.
Why didn't you research it?
But you could have found them. You could have found them in the same place that
Yes,
Ken
you
did.
made a statement. You made an inaccurate statement to us, and I'm offended by that. You're asking us to make a decision with information that you failed to research, and I'm very offended by that inaccuracy.
Ms. Blackburn, it's not my intent nor my desire.
You came to speak for them, and you stated a fact. You stated to us that there were no significant architects involved with this home. Did you not?
No, Ms. Blackburn, I said from
You did say that?
Ms. Blackburn, if you allow me to finish, ma'am, I'd appreciate the courtesy of that. I said that from our research and from our evaluation, we could not find a notable architect of record. I have not seen nor was given the opportunity by Mr. Barkley to review his submission before today. Frankly, I had not seen it until it came on the screen. If I had seen it and I had conferred and found information that proved my other submissions needed to be amplified, I would have done so. That's what we do so in court proceedings all the time as litigators. It's never my desire to state incorrect information to anybody or any commission, especially one of this nature. So with that said, I stand true to my original statement. I still have not seen these renderings or drawings, and we have worked, as was just noted, notable architects in this area and have researched with our consultants on this. So this is not an issue of trying to mislead the commission in any way. But I think
Well, let me interrupt.
Yes,
Chris and Kim obviously found this information, and it obviously wasn't easy to find. They've been digging, and I'm a bit resentful that you did in fact say there was no significant architecture here, and that you had done the research on it. So you haven't done any research on it. Otherwise, you would have found the same thing they did.
that's actually inconsistent with what you just said. You said they dug and they dug and they dug and they found. We have dug and dug and dug, and we didn't find. These renderings and drawings, again, I can't even zoom in on them based on what the lithographs they appear to be. And again, I come to this saying, this is what we have found. I would have happily collaborated with the Bullards. They're the next door neighbors. If they would have come to us and said, listen, this is what we've in fact found. We have been looking for evidence of who the architect was. But what can't be lost in all of this, and you just heard it as well, is that the most recent renovation, the renovations that add tremendous square footage, cannibalize all the work that has been outlined in the original structure. For those that have been in this structure, for frank's sake, the realtors who listed the structure called it a teardown. Called it a teardown. The realtors did. That's what our client will testify to in Chancery. So we're balancing the desires of preserving the historic elements of a time period, which frankly no longer have been frankly consumed by a subsequent renovation that almost doubled the size of this home.
Are there any other participants who would like to comment? If not, we'll close the public portion and have a board discussion. Okay, so let's close public portion. Board members, where are we?
Hello, this is Roger Higgins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've been quiet until now. I just wanted to say I completely agree with, I'm sure at one time this was a lovely house. I have no doubt. I have lived in an Edwin Keeble house and completely 100% respect his ability and his history in this area. I think it's a little bit of a stretch to hang on to the house because of an addition he did rather than the whole house. And I completely agree with the gentleman who just said whatever additions have been done most recently have pretty much cannibalized the house to where it's the architectural merit of it is kind of beat down. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? So we will close the public portion and start the board deliberation.
I guess I could say something if I could make one quick statement.
Sure.
My house next door at 1218 was also a 1939 house. And I don't think anybody in Belmead would have wanted us to leave that house like it was. It was an old federal style, and we came out and away, and I mean there are a few things that we kept, a staircase and the front doors, but everything else is redone. And I think all of Belmead loves our house and our setting and what we have done to improve it. So I would hate to think that everybody, including us as owners, would have been stuck with what was there from 1939 or any additions therefore. So that's it.
Thank you. Doug?
I must have been shuffling my papers and got on the screen. I just wanted to remind the commission that if you are, and I'm not saying you should do one thing or another, if you're inclined to turn down the application, I think it's important that you make specific findings from the guidelines, both as to whether it's a property of significance. And I think Mr. King is correct. And the first 5 criteria, they are conjunctive. So I think you would have to say that all of those are present. And then the second list, if you will, the A, B, C, D, E, F are disjunctive. So it could be any one of those. Having listened to the whole debate and interesting presentation by both sides, I think you could make findings either way. Quite honestly, it's up to you. It's your decision, not mine. But I was in a zoning hearing down in court hearing down in Franklin County this morning about the importance of making findings in zoning hearings. So, or hearings of boards like this. So I'd urge you to do that and pay attention to what you're doing, depending on what your motion is. But I'll stop shuffling my papers. I didn't mean to come up on the screen.
Okay. Ron Ferris?
Did we lose Ron?
He may be muted.
Hope not.
So the public hearing is closed.
Yes.
Mal, what do you think about taking an initial vote?
An additional vote.
An initial vote. We'd like to,
Oh.
pool the board.
What is that, Ron?
I'm probably prepared to vote.
What you usually do is get a motion and a second and then have discussion and then vote. But
Yeah,
remember, the person making the motion and the person making the second they're not stuck with that. That's not their vote. They're just trying to put the ball in play. That's how I would.
I have a question first. Like for demolition, if it's 1962, does that come before demolition, or is it just 39 and back?
I think we could probably stipulate that.
I
Okay.
don't know. Wow. One thing to remember, none of these guidelines are written as hard and fast prohibitions. So you could conclude that even a property of significance could be demolished if you, for reasons like some of the reasons that have been offered. But it says that the demolition of significant properties is discouraged. So that gives the board the commission a lot of discretion either way. But I don't know about the 1962, Michael, Gavin, Lyle, that's not before, it's not before us on this item anyway, is it?
What's the question, Doug?
The question, well, Gavin, maybe you should need to repeat your question.
I was just seeing like if it were a house of 1962, I guess it would still come before us.
Yes.
Like I'm thinking of
Yes.
the
Any demolition does. It doesn't really.
Yes.
It
Ron,
could
I'm
under
curious.
certain other criteria.
Ron,
Even if the architecture is not
Yeah.
congruent.
That I don't know. But this one is clearly old enough to be considered a property of significance. So we don't really have the 1962 situation before. I'm going to be quiet for a second.
Yeah, Ron, I'm curious to go back to what Ron was saying. I think maybe you ought to make a motion and then we can discuss it, Ron. What you're thinking.
I'm prepared to discuss it. I think that both sides have made very good cases. I struggle with a couple matters with the application. Is that I understood the application that we were also reviewing a new home, and we're apparently not.
I was going to bring that up. You're exactly correct.
So that's off the table. Because I think I've said in the past, I do make a strong evaluation of what's being considered when we're looking at what's being demolished. What I see of value in this home is what is the original structure. I don't place a strong amount of weight on what the Keeble side. I'm respectful of that, but it was an addition very small addition, frankly. The main body of the house is of the architect that I'm putting my interest in. I think the applicant, in terms of what was presented, I have a strong view, as I think Bunny did or Mal did. I'm a little disappointed in what was given to us as fact. I guess we could argue that whether it was or not, but the opposing viewpoint was well prepared. I'm prepared to make a motion to deny the tear down. I think the applicant could work with the existing structure. As big of a home as they're planning, based on what they presented, I think the board would be looking at a design if they did include the original structure. I think the board would be looking at a rather transformed historic home. I think the applicant could probably still make that case. But I've been in the structure. It's habitable. I've been in it recently when it was on the market. When it was listed as a tear down, the board did not exist. I think I'm correct in that. Lyle, correct me.
That's true.
So as far as what it was listed as, I think when it was listed, it could have been torn down. Other board members speak up.
Well, my opinion is this, that there's clearly a lot of evidence that this house has some historical significance. And I think it's this board's obligation to make the present owners do exactly what Ann Russell has done with the same kind of structure next door. Take what's there and make it better.
I agree with Mal, and I think that when we look at the reason that this board was created, I think is for this very purpose. And I saw, you know, when we lose these homes, they're gone forever. And I am impressed by the architect, and I am impressed, and I think we should, as a community, do everything we can, even with the Edwin Keeble additions, to respect that and to value it as a community. And both of these architects have been presented as significant to me and important, and they bring value to this structure. I would be thrilled to see a renovation and a restoration and consider additions to this structure. I'm really happy to know that, as Mrs. Russell said, that the owner has cared for the land already, has worked on the trees, has clearly already improved the project and improved the home. And I think that's great for the street and great for the community. I think the loss of this house would be a loss for the community.
I sort of concur with Ron on the main body of the house. I feel like Edwin Keeble is a great architect, and I worked on a lot of his houses, and we've restored them, many in Belmead. But I don't see those wings as congruent with the original 1939 structure, and I would feel that the owner would not be penalized to, have that as a burden. If they could come up with a reasonable solution to use the main body of the existing historic structure.
Well, I'll disagree a little bit about that. I mean, granted, the house that was originally designed by
Puget
is most of what's valued there, but an architect of Keeble's statute, even if he was just doing two small additions, he wouldn't screw up the original architecture. Ought to be able to get back to that. So.
Yeah, I would think that's true. We had to tear a pool house down because it was just not congruent with the house, and we still saved the existing house on Truxton, and it got into the Historic Nashville Awards for that.
Well, I'm happy to, has anyone made a motion yet? Did
It's
you make a
it's
motion,
made.
Ron? It is, okay, well,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I suggest something? I think, given the importance of, and I think from the discussion, I can see where the vote may be going. I would ask that Ron Ferris amend his motion to state that the property does meet all the definitional criteria for a property of significance, and also state which of the following, there's a list of criteria in the guidelines about, architectural significance, historical association, and just state, in addition to meeting the definitional criteria, which of those criteria does it meet? Is it architectural? Is it, you'll have to, I don't know whether you have your guidelines in front of you. Is it the work of a master builder or designer or architect? We've heard proof about that. I would suggest you do that, Ron, and then get a second on that same basis, because we want to make the record clear should there be a request for court review of this. That's why I'm here. So, Ron, are you with me on that?
I am. You said something at the beginning, Doug, about that the ones that you thought needed to be conjunctive and the ones that did not.
The definition, it says that significant buildings are defined as follows, and it lists 5 criteria. Built prior to 1939, possesses integrity of design, workmanship, materials, embodies qualities or characteristics considered significant to historical and architectural context of Belmead, might be determined to be a contributing property to an eligible historic district, which we are. So is that 1, 2, 3, 4? That's just 4 criteria, excuse me. And possesses one of the following characteristics, and those are your A, B, C, D, E, F, G in your guidelines as to things like architecture. Is there an identification with an historical person? So I think you need to, the first group, the ones that Mr. King expressed, and I agree with them, are conjunctive in the way that's done in the ordinance or in the guidelines. You need to find that all those are present, okay? And then I think
That's A, B, C, and D.
no, they don't. These are unfortunately not numbered or lettered. They really are just part of the definition. So that's why I said my recommended motion would be that it meets the definition, all the criteria for the definition of a property of significance. And then any of the A, B, C, D, E, F, G criteria you find are present in this case. So not all of them. I don't think there's been proof of an historical post person. Andrew Jackson didn't have tea there or something. So he might have, but he would have been outdoors. Anyway, just think it's important we do that. Pardon me, because I was traumatized by a court hearing this morning with those very issues before the court, and it made me think about it.
so do we want to pull that screen up and go through it with that? Could you pull that up for us, Lyle, so that
Yes, sure. What,
help Ron?
Board members, one thought in the weight of what's before us, in fairness to the applicant, we're taking what the opposing viewpoint presented as fact. I'm probably interested, and I may want to take a look at all of that. I'm not disputing what they're saying. It was well presented. I'm not disputing the applicant said, but I think that knowing that what we would be voting on, we would be stating we know as fact. I don't know that.
Could we be given, could we ask them where they got that information?
I think they need to submit it to us, and we take a look at it. I'm considering a deferral.
Did they?
Was that in the package, Lyle?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. What what they presented to us a while ago, was it in that information where they?
No, that was a PowerPoint that I opened today. It was actually sent to me Friday after work, and I have had to catch up with 140 emails since last week. I just got that today around lunchtime, and so I'm actually seeing it for the first time as well.
Are they
Does
still
it not have to be submitted with the package at the,
No,
it does not?
no, it'd be just like if we had a public
Oh,
meeting and someone came forward with some drawings during the meeting, which we've had several times. So no.
Well, and the other issue is we're short a person this week. So
True.
maybe the applicant would prefer to have
A deferral.
Net here.
Well, we have a quorum though. I don't think
I
that's
know.
going to wait.
I know.
But I would, are the gentleman who gave us that information on the architects, do you have supporting information on that? Is he still on the Zoom call?
Kim is waving.
I think he may be muted still because
Thank you for your question. Yes, the information's available. We'll be glad to share it in any fashion. It was the combined effort of many people doing research, just trying to find out as much as we can about the house and also about both of the architects of prominence.
I have a question too on one of the things that you presented. And Doug, is it okay if I ask him a question still? Are we in a
Yeah.
place where I can ask?
Certainly, it's up to the chair to reopen
we
that.
can-
I think by
sure.
agreement, you're doing this.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I saw a comment from Ridley Wills in there, and that he is recommending that the house not be torn down. And I think we can all recognize him as the Belmead historian. He's written multiple books and has told us a lot about many of these houses. Where did that comment come from too, when we're?
I'd be glad to answer the question. I reached out to Ridley. I worked on, our firm worked on a couple of projects on Chickering Road. And so when Ridley, I've known him for probably 25 years. So when he was preparing the book on Chickering Road, he and I had delightful conversations about it. And when George and Pat approached me and Chris on research on the house, I said, well, I'm going to reach out to Ridley because he includes the house in his book. And then I contacted him and sent him the information. We sent him actually the PowerPoint that you saw and asked for his comments. And he said, look, having reviewed that, I think it would be sad for the house to be torn down. And I received that in an email and I clarified it, make absolutely sure that our quote that was shown to you were his words.
And so the house was included in the book as historically significant. In Ridley's book, I'm sorry, you're muted.
I don't know that that's that.
Did you say that this house was included in his book on Chickering Road?
Well, let me clarify that. He included, I think, every residence on Chickering Road. It was a very exhaustive review of the homes that exist on Chickering Road and their history. You know, I think he wrote like a page or so about each house, and he had some funny things, but I don't think he took a position like that at all in his book because he featured a lot of things that are new.
But he did when you approached him, he gave you that quote and permission to use that quote. That I think the home should be torn down.
Yes, he did give us that quote.
Okay, thank you. Well, I respect him a lot as a Belmead historian.
He's a fabulous treasure. He is just a fabulous.
He does. I'm reading one of his Belmead history of Belmead Plantation right now.
So do we have a motion from someone to defer this for a month?
I'm going to make a motion to defer. I'd like to review all of the information provided to us.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to defer for,
Second.
if the applicant would like it. I'm going to say 30 days, but I'm open to an extended period.
I'll second
that.
Gavin?
I'd second that, yeah.
Bunny?
Aye.
Ron?
Aye.
And Mal votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, a little bit of a point of order from my question, because I am true to my sentiment. I do not like incorrectness of statements of fact to be in our submissions. Thus, I'd like to review it and correct any misstatement of fact. I take that as my affirmative obligation as a lawyer. May I ask for lack, we would say in court, a briefing schedule, but when can I submit a supplemental filing based on this deferral period? Because we're out of sync, I think. We've never seen any actual time period to appear at the next hearing. Does that make sense? I haven't seen any of these drawings yet either, like Mr. Patterson had said. They weren't sent to us, even though we were of record on the file.
Well, we don't have possession of them, so I can't promise them to you. If we get them, I will be more than glad to see that you get copies of them.
That's all I'm asking, because I don't want Ms. Blackburn to be mad at me that I've made any intentional misstatement of fact. That's not what's happening here. I've never seen those renderings.
I just don't, the question I have is, what kind of research did you do on the architects?
We have gone through with our architectural firm and our consultants trying to find this information. In fact, I work with, we've bought Ridley's book, we've bought all of his books on Bellmead, or checked them out to look at them. I've worked with his godson, for crying out loud. So I have access to the gentleman himself, and I haven't been able to discern and find who the architect of records were for this. And again, that's not saying that that's not incorrect information. There was an exhaustive amount of work gone into this on our end to figure out who these architects were. And that's what we've done. So like I said, I'd like to reserve the right to do a supplemental filing to correct any misstatements. If in fact those are the architects, we'll acknowledge those are the architects.
Well, those records are now part of the record of this hearing and are public records and are available to you as soon as you can physically review them. So
Thank you.
I'm not.
Okay, well, item number 2.
First item under new business is the application for certificate of appropriateness for Seth Yazdian, 4406 Honeywood Drive, for the demolition of existing home, property of conservation, and construct a new single-family home. So whoever is representing, you're up, and I will share my screen here shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is David Baker. I'm with Tippett Cease Baker Architecture, representing Seth and Tal Yazdian, with submittal for a new project on the property of 4406 Honeywood Drive, which is on the corner of Allendale and Honeywood. The existing structure is a post-war 1948 structure that has been neglected, with, I believe the square footage is close to 2,900 square foot, with about 3 bedrooms, including basement and attic space. It is our understanding to meet the needs, the current needs of a homeowner that would be transitioning to this property, if the house was considered to be renovated to accomplish current needs, the house would be unidentifiable with any additions. The house is also currently to the far northeast of the property, omitting most areas to renovate or extend the house, only allowing that to extend to the west, which would also impede good growth in the floor plan. So what we have presented and submitted to the board is a proposal for a new structure within the building envelope, keeping the scale low. And in doing that, we have created an H-form type of plan and created parapets on the rear property and on the front property, with three gables, a center ridge that would allow us to keep this ridge in keeping and lower than most of the structures here on Honeywood Drive.
David, you want me to pull up certain thumbnails?
You certainly can. We have also submitted, Lyle and board, the proposed property, and I think we may have even submitted more than requested, floor plans and elevations. We understand the importance of this property and how it is viewed both on Allendale and Honeywood. In our approach, all elevations, not just Honeywood, but also Allendale, and the rear and the side, the north, west, all have equal materials and emphasis put on those elevations, that they might be approachable, scalable, and humble in nature. We are also introducing those materials that might be found throughout any home in Belmead, that being stone, veneer, slate, or clay tile. We were still kind of going through that design process, depending a little bit on availability, budget, and client, with clad type windows, all those regular materials that we would hope for in any house found in Belmead. And what you're seeing, I believe, is the front elevation as it would appear on Honeywood. And the rear, the lower elevation is that which faces west to the one neighbor, with the garage doors facing the same orientation in the existing house, that there would be no different exposure of garage than is currently available. The top drawing that Lyle has scaled down to is that other elevation, again, smaller in scale on Ellendale, again, taking, approach into the neighbors that are to the north off of Ellendale, with a smaller roof structure, flat terrace, facing the rear property. And then you're looking at again, a lower bay structure that would be off of the kitchen, trying to borrow light and matching, our scale and appropriateness here with our windows and proportions that you would find most of any traditional older home here in Belmead. And again, the lower drawing here is the rear property, again, with all attempts that we have to break down the scale, with everything facing rear at the lowest possible elevation of one kind of story parapet, with dormers that are breaking the second story. So a 1.5 story structure on all three faces, except for the west part of the facade that is using the natural terrain of the property at its best.
Are we just hearing the demolition today, Lyle, or are we going to review the package of drawings as well?
Well, I had written it as demo and new single-family home.
Okay. So do we need to look at the demolition first and then dive into the actual house part of this?
I'm going to show the existing house, and David, if you want to expand on that.
So the existing house, it was my understanding from the client that somewhere, I think at the end of 2019, that it may have been previously submitted and maybe approved for demolition. But I'm not fully aware of that. So I would assume that we are resubmitting for that same submission of demolition of this 1948 post-war smaller home that has water seepage in the basement, neglect of the wood windows, decay in the shutters. There's no significant material that we could consider to be reused. I think Lyle's scaling down of the scale of the existing houses there found on Honeywood and the adjacent properties. This is certainly one of the smaller homes on this street and on Allendale.
Are you all going to save the boxwoods, David?
I'll bring an expert for that there, David.
Okay.
And what you're seeing here is the imagery, stone, material usage, scale of some past projects that we've worked on, and of some imagery of our intent.
Anyone else on the call who would like to speak for or against this proposal? Board, do we have any other questions for David?
Well, I think if we we want to, can we just do we're going to do the demolition first and then we'll discuss the
Yeah,
plan.
yeah, we'll do demolition then.
I'll make a motion to approve the demolition of this property.
I second that motion.
Okay, Ron,
You're muted.
Ron votes aye.
Bunny? Am I
Votes
muted?
aye.
Bunny,
Bunny votes aye.
Gavin,
I vote aye.
Mal votes aye. All right, so let's review the drawings. David, you want to walk us through the elevations on the proposed structure?
Certainly. We're proposing a type of Belgian loaf, cream stone, clad windows, operable wood shutters. We do have a little bit of flush wood siding on our dormers. The dormers, again, trying to reduce the scale as much as possible. The second floor has a clip height of 6'3", which is allowing us really to bring down that ridge height as much as we can to make this approachable. In most of our approaches to any home, we try and celebrate light and the property. And in this house type, every room is being able to kind of celebrate its location with visibility, at least with 3 views of light towards the property, the greater property across the street on Honeywood, with also great respect and I think importance to Honeydale really being a gate type property for the significant street of Ellendale and the intersection here of Honeywood. We're showing a copper lantern celebrating the entry into this house. It is a way for us to kind of give coverage to the entry, allowing also for the homeowner to have some transparency and light with our divisional light pattern here in the mountains with a large oak type door that's about 5 feet by 8 feet tall.
Lyle, do you have the materials sheet that we could review?
It should be on page 3 of the submittal.
What? There you go.
Thank you.
Let me make sure I'm muted on this conference.
So your roofing material is a clay tile?
It's a clay tile or possibly slate, depending on, I'm juggling a little bit, Gavin, here between 2 homeowners that haven't quite made up their mind between those 2 materials, but it would be of some type of stone. And again, also depending a little bit on the availability of the stone, whether we go with that kind of neutral Belgian loaf. Naturally, I think a clay tile a flat clay tile would be appropriate. If we go to something a little bit more grayer, local, then we would probably go to a slate tile to match that appropriateness in color.
Now, it says stone veneer. This is a full bed though, right?
It is a full 4 to 6. That's what we consider. It's not a structural stone, so anything that is applied, we consider to be a veneer, but it is a 4 to 6 inch thick stone, yes.
Well, all the materials look good.
What is the style of the house? What would you call the architectural style of this home?
I always struggle with those questions. We've all kind of evolved in time. It's got reference a little bit, kind of a European Belgium, a little bit of kind of countryside, involvement of farmhouse. I don't know necessarily if I'd throw a style onto it. I mostly kind of concentrate on scale and appropriateness and materials, that it might be as timeless as possible.
One of our requirements is that it has a defined architectural style.
Well, certainly, and I think we've noted something to be a European type farmhouse, if you were to go some kind of eclectic style there.
Ron, you have comments?
I do not.
Well, anyone else on the call wish to speak for or against this project? There being none, we'll close the public portion and the board will contemplate.
I will say there are elements of the house that I think are very attractive. There is a lot going on. That's a concern that I have, particularly around the front door. Kind of trying to wrap my head around that.
I think for me, it does have balance and proportion. The scale seems nice as far as where it is on the street. I mean, they've got a great view across to a vacant lot. It does sort of seem like it's Belgian in style, I guess, that sort of Belgian farmhouse. And there are other examples of this in the city.
And it fits well on that lot, or with the other houses on the two adjoining streets.
David, oh, I'm sorry. I wonder what kind of stone that is that's going to be on this, because I know there's a couple other stone houses, one on Jackson and there's another one on Bellmead Boulevard that was recently built. I guess I'm wondering if, what actual type stone is this going to be?
Am I able to answer?
Sure.
Sorry. It'll be very similar to the stone, Gavin, that we used on the last submittal of examples of houses. I think you might be able to see that stone. It was a local stone collected. The last inspirational photo.
Is it like a crab orchard stone, a buff or something?
I'd have to find a sample where we got it from.
Okay.
Sorry for not being a little bit more.
So this is the type stone that you will use?
Yes. And I believe that's on Chickering. Chris
Yes.
Tippett, my partner, just recently completed.
Thank you.
Is this the one that we're looking at? Is that Frank Major's house? Okay.
Buddy, I understand what you're saying about a clear identifiable style, but I can appreciate the presentation. I think it's representative of many stone houses you could see throughout the city, a modern interpretation of that. Appreciate the quality of materials. I think one could always edit something from a subjective viewpoint, but I find the balance and symmetry pleasing. I'm pleased to see it rendered in materials that are consistent with other stone houses. There's some on Westview that are quite old that are all stone. I think it's a contributing residence to the street.
I think it reads timeless as well. I think it's sort of got a timeless quality to it.
So is there precedent for the arch at the front door and that much glass around the door? Are you all? And I think it's going to be a huge improvement to the street too, by the way. I think demolishing that other house is going to be an improvement to the street. And I do like the symmetry of the wings and it's just around the front door. I'd just like to know if there is a precedent for that.
I think the precedence that I would find is that it's an interpretation. I think you said that it's got a European flair to it. I think you could find these examples of maybe it was at one point a very rural structure that got converted into a residence. I mean, there's many stories one could tell. I'm not bothered by the arch. I find it sort of a gathering element of the whole elevation.
I mean, historically, Lutchens did this. Also, C.F. Boise used this a lot in his architecture. So there's some historic precedents for
There's a
that.
precedent for it. Okay, great.
So do we have a motion for approval?
I'd make a motion that we approve this. as
Second.
presented.
Okay, Bunny,
I vote aye.
Gavin,
I vote aye.
Ron,
Aye.
and Mel votes aye.
Thank you, David.
Very much, David.
Thank you.
Second item under new business, the application for a certificate of appropriateness for Bear Branch Revocable Trust, 4524 Millrace Lane, to construct a new single-family home on a vacant lot. And I'll pull up the plans here shortly, and
Lyle, if you would open or start with the site plan drawings submitted by Dave Rick. Board members, I will be deferring on this one as I'm making the submission.
Okay.
Will we have a quorum without Ron?
As long as all three of us agree.
Okay.
Well, you'll have a quorum, and I think you can still, the vote can be those present and constituting a quorum. Let me look, while you're talking, let me double check that.
Okay.
So,
I'll dive in, board members, because I know we've been here long. Fortunately, we're not tearing down a house, so no consideration there. Brief history of Millrace Lane. Millrace consists of 7 nearly new formed properties. Probably 20 or so years ago, John Alden Rogers created this out of a single piece. 7 lots of approximately just over 40,000 square feet to meet the minimum standards for lots. Lot 7 has remained vacant and unbuilt on, obviously the longest, and for good reason. It's a very challenging piece of property. It is suffers from and has many characteristics that have proved challenging by numerous previous owners. I've advised and consulted on probably at least 3 previous concepts of this, none of which ever gained traction due to the complexity of the property. Topographically, it falls from the bottom of this page towards the top of this page over 25 feet across its sort of area to be built upon, or nearly 25 feet. Below the uppermost setback line, which is the contour of 4 to 74, everything below that point is in floodplain. All of the properties along Millrace suffer from being in the floodplain. This one suffers the most because of its topographic proximity to Richland Creek and Sugar, I think it's called Sugar Creek. But and this lot also had the benefit of being filled with virgin soil or not virgin soil that helped create the other 6. So it's got significant challenges in its just topography and how to place a house. I might add that because of the 474 contour, the building envelope on this property gets quite small and concentrated to the sort of middle to the right side of the property. If Lyle could pan out maybe just a little bit, you can probably see more of the property, but a significant portion of this property will remain just open grass area. We, in investigating the building envelope and its size, we did seek and secure a reduction in the rear setback from 60 feet to 40 feet through the Planning Commission. That would allow for a footprint that approaches the allowable footprint on these properties. All of the homes on Millrace, I've done 2, have maximized their available footprint because of the relatively small size of the lots that were created. So the bulk standards on this are meeting the maximums, but that is a common characteristics of the other 6 homes along Millrace. Stylistically, we are asking for the board to consider a prairie style home, which if you look in the guidelines book that we reference in our guidelines is a clear and identifiable style as a modern prairie. A contemporary interpretation of that is what we're submitting here today. Some of the characteristics of a prairie style are often symmetrical in massing. And Lyle, you might flip to our rendered elevation. Then I'm gonna have you slide down in a second and view the other 4 remainings. But often symmetrical in massing, low pitched roofs, prominently hipped with wide overhangs, typically 2 stories, porches, eaves, and cornices, and facade detailing to emphasize horizontal lines. Common to have offsetting masonry elements of rectangular shapes to support horizontal lines or porches and overhangs. Common characteristics to have contrasting textural materials of masonry, siding, or stucco. Windows often emphasize vertical geometry and help offsetting the broad roof overhangs and the horizontal emphasis of other exterior elements. So our modern interpretation of that, and Lyle, if you would slide down to the next elevation. Our goal here is to, and we're presenting a material palette of simple contrasting materials. We're going to be using a painted brick with real stucco horizontal band above a belt course line to emphasize the horizontal lines. We're using bracketed and supported horizontal members above the windows in the front porch. Broad overhang of 3 feet with a strong horizontal line across that. Large expanses of glass in the center portion to help, well, I'll come back to that in just a second. If you'll look to the rear elevation, Lyle, the rear and the sides of this, the rear faces not Belmead residence, but this elevation would not be seen from any public view in Belmead. But you can see the severe slope that we're presented with. Wade Rick is on board as well if we need to have any questions about the siding of the house, but go to the garage side, Lyle, if you would. Consistent with the broad overhangs and with belt coursing of brick to emphasize the horizontal lines and consistent use of the horizontal elements above doors and windows. I want to emphasize that the materials being used, though contemporary, the materials being used are going to be presented in a palette and in a manner that I think emphasizes prairie style. And back to the horizontal banding. If you'll allow, we'll go back to the front elevation just above this. At the front door, we're going to be using a natural Tennessee limestone, but we're going to introduce a common characteristic in its textural patterning that's done in prairie styles is you'll see horizontal lines separating larger sections of stone. Those horizontal lines will be emphasized with a change in texture and pattern from the larger pieces of stone. Softening what is a severe topography, Wade and I have come up with what I think will help sort of meld this left side into the landscape. The emphasis will be to plant and allow an ivy to climb onto the lower left section of this, as well as to the right side of it, to help soften and meld into the topography. One could ask why we're not retaining the far left side. And we can speak with Wade a bit to that, but the common answer to that is that 474 is a strong line on this site, and that is the line that no change can be made below that without severe penalties on the stormwater impact. And that's frankly why this site has never been built on, is nobody could come up with a reasonable scheme that didn't grow out and into the floodplain for a home meeting certain standards. By not breaking that 474 line and introducing massive amounts of topography change and an impact to the stormwater, what we're hearing from our civil and stormwater engineers is that they can easily meet the guidelines the city has for stormwater. Wade, I think you're on. If you have anything to add, the board has any questions relative to the siting of it, I'm happy to answer.
Is there a grading plan, Ron? You have a grading plan?
Yeah, Wade, reference them to the grading plan you'd like to see.
There is, thanks, Ron. There's a grading plan. I want to say it may actually be that 6th slide in this presentation, Lyle.
On this set or yours?
It's definitely in ours.
On this set, Lyle.
Okay.
I'm sorry. What are we looking for, Wade?
We're looking for the grading plan. Go up one more, 2 more. Let's see, that one doesn't actually have the proposed contours.
It looks like there's about 20 feet of grade change from the garage down to the lower end of the house. Is that correct?
Gavin, that's correct.
That sounds about right, yes.
Do you all have to go to BZA, Ron, to get a height variance?
We are 1 foot over on the left side. So yes, we'll be in front of BZA for that and for the pool.
Okay. I failed. Do you all have inspirational images for the Prairie style included in this packet?
I do. So these 4 images give some insight to both the effort for the windows and fenestrations of it, as well as you'll see the emphasis for the stone or masonry coming up to a belt course line and then changing into a material. In our instance, it's going to be changing to a real stucco. It's not a drive it or a fake component. It's going to be real stucco. And then masonry below that line. If you'll scan down, Lyle, in the bottom right corner of this drawing, there's a house on Westview that is the inspiration for the color of stucco. It probably gives the best. I think people are familiar with
the new one.
Yes, this residence. And frankly, this picture doesn't do it justice. It's a nice, soft, gray, warm tone is what we're after for the stucco. I couldn't ever really get a really good picture of this. This picture seems, at least on my screen, it looks to flesh out, but it's got a real nice, soft gray tone to it. But the windows in this house also are reflective of the type of window we'd be proposing, a darker framed window, though not as divided in panes as this.
So you've got more of a storefront window on yours?
I don't know that it'd be storefront. It's still a classic recessed window. It'll be recessed into the brick, and it's at the stucco. It'll be recessed and the stucco will return back to it. But it will be a limited frame around a window.
And the trellis over the front door material?
That is going to be a painted wood product.
And the door going in is like 8 feet, or is it?
It is.
Okay.
Emphasis of verticality is sort of unapologetic, common with some of the Prairie style. But again, contemporary interpretation of that.
So is that brick shown and then stucco above?
Correct.
Okay, so it's a brick. Do we know what, kind of brick are you looking at? Is it going to be a grayish blonde, or is it going to be a?
It is going to be a painted brick with, we're thinking it will have a sand texture in it. We're not looking for slick contemporary palette of materials. We want texture in shade and shadowing of them. So it's not a brick unpainted. It will be a painted brick.
Can we go back to your inspirational photos on the the other Prairie examples?
Yeah. The one on the top right, Bunny, has actually either painted red. We're not after that. We're or stained. We're not staining the wood. But we do have a broad eave overhang similar to that.
And can we look back at the other houses on Mill Race?
Starting with the top right is our vacant lot. Top middle is the house to the left of it, which is recently completed. That's the next one down, which is the Rhett residence. The house that you're seeing on the left there, though shielded by trees, is probably the cleanest lined house on there, sort of a contemporary interpretation of it with the ivy climbing on it.
Where's the elevation again for the lower part of the house, if you're looking from the floodplain back at the house?
Yeah, I'll click to that. It's the bottom one on this elevation.
And that's what you're saying is over the height with BZA by a foot?
Correct. Measuring from 475 or so.
So the pool is up, you've got like a 10 or 12 foot retaining wall there. Does that come in play with BZA or no?
It does not retain.
For the pool?
Correct. It's supporting the upper level pool. I go back to site plan. That top right corner of the terrace is supported by masonry piers. And Wade, correct me, I'm not sure if that's been interpreted, that's going to have board review.
The height of the piers holding up the cantilever terrace?
Yes.
I know that the grading is certainly something that is gonna require the board review. The height of the terrace, I don't believe it is.
Because it also looks like the pool goes over the set. That'll be BZA, but the pool goes over
Right.
the setback line.
That is the lower fountain. It's a trough at a lower level there. You see the steps where you step down along the terrace there. There's a lower terrace there.
Gotcha. And those steps that I see on that other basement level, those are showing like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps to that area there. So that gets you out and down to that level somehow.
That's the basement level, yes. Just
Okay.
allows for an egress point from the basement.
So you're saying that
Under-
terrace is cantilevered above?
No, it's got 2 piers, Gavin, and underneath that terrace is all of the mechanical equipment
That's
for pool.
Okay.
So it is shielded in within envelope.
Right. I guess it's not in our jurisdiction, but as far as the screen planting for that side for the neighbor, that's a big elevation for the house. Lyle, I don't know if you can go back to that one again. The elevation below.
Well, stay on the site plan for a second, Gavin, because that's a good
Okay.
point. This, and you see this on this colored site plan, this side elevation does not have a direct view from lot 6 on its left.
Okay.
Are you with me?
Yeah.
But he is showing, he does have proposed planting to occur on that lower elevation.
Okay.
Yeah, Ron, I'm a purist for my materials and just not too many materials. And I'm really not familiar with this prairie style at all. Is it typical to use this many different materials?
Yeah, if you look in a field guide.
And I don't have mine handy, so I don't have my field guide with me right now, but that's why I wanted to look at those inspiration photos. So it's typical to have, because that's a lot of material. So that's typical for the style. Brick, stone, stucco.
It is siding, masonry, siding, stucco, oftentimes introduction of even heavier wood elements. I'm looking at my field guide right now.
Well, the most famous one is Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, that's your go-to, like Falling Water or Taliesin West, East. All that's prairie style architecture.
Right.
Here's the challenge of this site with any house is that the site begins to mandate a house that has tall and skinny components because of its narrow footprint.
Right.
And if you could spread this house out on the site, it might be, or I not say might, I know it would be a little more integrated into it, but from the day this site became available, it's been challenged by the fact that how do you put a house on it? In fact, when we took it to the Planning Commission, one of the reasons they gave us the reduction in the rear setback is because its footprint didn't allow for somebody to even put a house on it that met the minimum size.
Yeah, my question is it even a buildable lot? Is it a buildable lot?
Oh, it's got its challenges. It's buildable.
Yeah, I guess for me, I struggle a little bit with the prairie style. It sort of, for me, throws it into the more contemporary architecture in a way. And I know you all probably struggle with it because that prairie style to me is just kind of low, horizontal, slung out, low roofs. So, yeah, I sort of agree with a little bit of the prairie, but you got a 20-foot or 46-foot elevation on that lower area, which, just by changing the terminology of prairie to contemporary, I mean, I don't know if I've seen.
David, if you look at prairie style houses, they classify, they fall into 2 categories. I'm looking at them right now. There's the very low slung 1-story ones, but then when you start looking at the earlier phases of it, they were 2 stories. I mean, it's in the description.
Can I ask this? Could we take just like a 2-minute break and let me grab my guide? Do y'all mind?
Yeah.
No, sure.
Go for it.
I'll be right back. Thanks.
Is that,
Well,
what's the railing at the pool? Is that a glass rail or is that,
It is.
yeah,
While Bunny's gone, is there anyone else on the call who wishes to speak to this case?
so
If you look at even in the language of it, Gavin, it says typically a single, 2, or even 3-story hipped roof mass on it. So when you start thinking some of the classic prairies are very 1-story driven, but if you go into the field guide, a lot of their examples are, most of their examples are 2-story.
okay.
With surety, the client is looking for something with a contemporary tone to it. I'm not trying to hide that fact.
Right.
They're not after a all stone cottage type structure.
What on that big elevation, there was one question I had for the tall one again. Actually the one from below, no one will probably see this, but there was 2 windows that were, it's on the lower elevation again. That, no, the one more, that one, there's sort of a panel. I don't know if you could explain the panel that, there's one panel that's raised and the other panel that's lower than that. I guess it seems like maybe those could be, I don't know what those rooms are. So I don't know, maybe it's affected by architecture, but
Fair question. The one on the right, Gavin, is a large picture window at the kitchen, and that's why it's raised up to meet the counter.
okay.
The one on the left is the main living space or the secondary living space. So it's down setting on floor.
Okay. So is there anything you could do maybe to make those a little more, I'm kind of a symmetric kind of.
You could probably introduce a horizontal line through there in
Yeah.
spandrel glass.
Okay. I think
So
everything else you've got there really, it has some rhythm and everything. It might help it to have that across there.
This being a primary, even though it's not seen from the street in the front, I think you can see the common sort of massing and proportion of the tall rectangular supports of masonry, then meeting the horizontal banding of stucco, which is very common to the Prairie style. But again, it's a contemporary interpretation of that.
Right.
Sorry about that, but it helped me to get my field guide. Ron, I think that the thing that, and my goodness, how hard it would be to build on this lot. And I certainly understand that you're really limited on what you can do with the way that you do have such a small little buildable space. I'm just looking at it thinking, how does it fit in with the rest of the houses on the street? And the wide mix of materials are my 2 concerns. And so that's why I just wanted to look through here at the Prairie style houses.
Well, let's take the blending of the street in that comment, because that's a very fair comment, Bunny, is that I think go back to my sort of example in the bottom right corner of that image sheet, is that the effort is to be is to be cleaner and simpler. I think when we see the palette of materials, even though it's not a traditional structure, I think what the board, we said from the very beginning, we're open to these contemporary interpretations. And hopefully, I think that just the quality of materials that we're proposing starts to separate it from contemporaries that don't have that, and its scale and proportion on it. As far as the mix of
I
materials,
think it's good to include contemporary, so I'm not concerned.
hey, Bonnie, you cut out.
House, because we've all talked about that. I think we have to be open to that. A
Right.
well done contemporary house. I
Well,
guess
maybe talk
I
about
went out there,
materials.
I drove out there today to look at it because I knew the lot was a disaster, because the house next door came to planning and zoning when I was on that board. And what Ron's drawn fits well with what else is on that street and blends as much as you can get it blended into the side of that bloody hill.
Yeah, it's, respectfully, it's a challenge in the client. Everybody that's looked at this property has been deterred by its challenges.
right.
I'm excited to have, in fact, when we got the variance for the rear setback, the planning commission wished us luck.
Is there any way that it could be balanced on that front elevation with some type of landscaping element? Can we go back to that front elevation, I guess? Because it does fall off. And I just wonder if there's any way to anchor some to the left, some type of, even if you did some type of well to kind of bring you a balanced view of that house.
Gavin, are you suggesting something left of this that continues retaining here?
Potentially, maybe just a little bit, even if you had, I'm just suggesting maybe a magnolia or some kind of evergreen that could kind of help you frame that elevation a little bit better, because it does fall off.
It does, and that's been one of our biggest challenges. I think that I'm sure that Wade and I could come up with, I don't know, I guess I can't move my cursor, but Lyle, if you can cursor where that ivy is, are you right in through here, Gavin, is what you're talking about?
Maybe just a little bit left of that, just so that you could kind of get something tall to help frame that elevation, because it is balanced in some regards, but then it just sort of falls off the hill, because I do know that lot and it is a challenge.
Well, we've got building envelope. We're in building envelope there. So yes, to answer your question.
Okay.
I probably don't disagree to get something of height right there that would help.
Yeah.
Balance that end.
It might be deceiving on that front elevation for us too. Is there more lawn there than it looks like? On the that will help too.
Yeah, it drops down from 93 to 73 almost. So it's
from the house to the other. That's pretty drastic.
Yeah, it's 20 feet of drop there.
Wow.
And Bunny, and looking at some of my notes on the material comment that you had, I want to make sure I address that. I think maybe what you're seeing on the varying materials is missing the intent. Our intent is that the brick and the stucco are of the same tonal value.
Uh-huh.
What we're after is a texture change between those two materials, which is common to the style. We looked at many different options of rendering the house, from it being all brick to being all stucco.
That's what I was wondering, if it were all stucco with the stone around the front door, but I understand you're probably trying to alleviate some of the verticality of the house too.
We are, and when we saw it in all stucco, it started to look just too plain.
Okay.
And I want least from my just subjective architectural opinion, I want some change in material. The tonal value is going to be consistent, but I want a change in material just to help it not be just all one big smooth surface.
Yeah.
Ron, when you said brick, are you all going to potentially slather coat that? I think you said it had a texture to the paint, possibly.
What we're proposing is to introduce sand into the paint, and it will be applied liberally. So you're going to get not smooth painted brick like you've been seeing. It's going to have texture to it.
Right.
There's
Yeah,
a
I
house
think
over.
we did one on Truxton. It's very similar. I think Wade worked on that as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, Ron, I'm satisfied that you've answered all the concerns that I have about it and have explained it adequately, and I'm ready to make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second. I guess I'm the only one.
And Mel votes aye.
I vote aye.
Bunny,
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you all.
That's the last of it, folks. Thanks so much. You were great, as always.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.